Welcome to the deep dive. We often talk about India's growth, its tech boom, but beneath it all, there's this fundamental truth. Agriculture isn't just an economic sector, it's really the heartbeat of rural India. It feeds the nation, supports millions, it upholds a way of life. But right now, we're facing something truly heartbreaking, something that needs our focus. We're talking about the deep, alarming crisis of farmer suicides, specifically in Maharashtra. The initial numbers, well, they just stop you in your tracks. Get this, 767 farmer suicides in Maharashtra just from January to March 2025. 3 months, that's it. It's a figure that really made us pause. It highlights a crisis that, well, isn't new, but it feels like it's escalating. So what's really going on here? Our mission today with you is to kind of peel back the layers. We want to dig into the causes, look at what's being done, and maybe find some paths forward. This goes beyond just numbers. It's about people, families, and massive systemic issues. So let's dive in. Okay, so let's start right there. 767 lives lost. First quarter of 2025. And it seems heavily concentrated, right? Where are these tragedies happening most?
Yes, overwhelmingly, the data points to the Vidarbha region. It is known for cotton, but sadly also for this deep agricultural distress. That's where the vast majority occurred.
And when it comes to getting help, the picture gets even bleaker, doesn't it?
It really does. Of those 767 cases, the official figures show only 376 were deemed eligible for the government aid. That's the RS 1 lakh payment.
Only 376, so less than half.
Exactly. Less than half, which means more than half the families received no official financial support right when they needed it most. And what's really concerning is that 200 families were specifically disqualified. They didn't meet the criteria.
Disqualified? What kind of criteria are we talking about? That sounds harsh.
Yeah, it often comes down to, proof of debt, land ownership details, things that can be incredibly hard to produce, especially for grieving families. It adds this bureaucratic layer to the tragedy.
And you mentioned Vidarbha, but even within that region, there are hotspots.
Absolutely. If you look at western Vidarbha places like Yavatmal, Amaravati, Akola, Bhutana, Wasim, the numbers are particularly stark. In that same period, January to March, they reported 257 suicides.
Okay.
But listen to this. Only 76 families in that area received the aid, and 74 were disqualified.
Wow. So the eligibility issue is even more pronounced there.
It really highlights these systemic hurdles. And it's not just Vidarbha. Hingoli district in Marathwada also saw 24 suicides. It shows the problem has roots across different regions.
That's a key point. This isn't something that just flared up in 2025. This has history.
Oh, absolutely. Decades of history. We're talking about over 60,000 farmers who have tragically taken their lives in Maharashtra since 1995. And consistently, Vidarbha and Marathwada have been the hardest hit areas. It's a long, painful story.
60,000 since 1995. And how does Maharashtra compare nationally?
Well, the scale is alarming. In 2022, Maharashtra accounted for a staggering 37.6% of all farmer suicides across India.
Almost 40% from one state.
Yes. It's disproportionately high. And the trend continues. There were 2,851 cases in 2023. And just looking at the Amaravati division alone, 557 cases in the first 6 months of 2024.
So it's persistent, it's systemic, it's not isolated bad years.
Precisely. It's a recurring crisis demanding deep answers.
Which leads us to the big question, why? With a problem this persistent, what are the core reasons this tragedy keeps unfolding?
That really is the crucial question. And, well, there's no single answer. It's more like a complex, tangled web of factors pushing farmers towards despair.
Okay, let's try to untangle that web. Where do we start?
I think we have to start with the debt trap. It's probably the most significant driver. Farmers, they have to borrow money to cultivate for seeds, fertilizer, pesticides.
Right, standard farming practice.
But often, especially small farmers, they can't get loans from banks easily, so they turn to private money lenders. And these aren't just regular loans. We're talking exorbitant interest rates, sometimes 5%, 10% per month.
Per month, not per year.
Per month. Or even higher seasonally. It means if your crop fails or the price collapses, you can owe double or triple what you borrowed incredibly quickly. It becomes this financial noose that just tightens and tightens. There's often no way out.
That's terrifying. Just the debt itself sounds overwhelming.
It is. And then layer on top of that what I'd call environmental roulette. Erratic rainfall, too much rain causing floods, or worse, long dry spells, droughts. It's devastating.
Especially in rain-fed areas like Vidarbha.
Exactly. Cotton farmers there are heavily dependent on the monsoon. If the rains fail at a critical time, the entire crop can be wiped out. Your whole year's income, gone. It makes farming incredibly risky.
So debt and unpredictable weather. A brutal combination. What else?
Even if you navigate the debt and the weather, you face the market. The problem of low prices for produce. Farmers can have a decent harvest, work incredibly hard, and still get prices so low they barely cover their costs. Sometimes they even lose money.
Selling your soul for peanuts, as they say.
That's a good way to put it. We see this particularly with volatile cotton prices. It's incredibly demoralizing. And add to that the rising costs of doing business. Seeds, especially genetically modified ones, fertilizers, pesticides, they all keep getting more expensive.
So costs go up, but income remains uncertain or low. Margins get squeezed.
Squeezed to nothing, often. Farmers are pushed towards these high-yield varieties, which require more expensive inputs, increasing their initial borrowing needs and their risk.
And a big part of that risk must be the lack of reliable water, right? The irrigation issue.
Absolutely critical. Huge parts of Maharashtra's farmland are still heavily reliant on the monsoon. Without assured irrigation, farming remains a high-stakes gamble every single season. Progress on building infrastructure like canals or check dams feels agonizingly slow in many areas.
It sounds like they're facing pressure from every direction. Does the government response factor in?
It does, but often in terms of perceived neglect. There's a widespread feeling among many farmers of being overlooked, that their issues aren't a priority. Even when support schemes exist, navigating the bureaucracy to actually access them can be a nightmare. We saw that with the aid eligibility numbers.
So the help might be there on paper, but getting it is another story.
Often, yes. And we can't ignore the invisible burdens, the sheer stress and family pressure. Farming isn't just a job. It's tied to identity, to family honor, generations of history.
Right.
When your livelihood is constantly threatened, the mental and emotional toll is immense. Add the pressure to provide for family, pay back debts. It's like living in a pressure cooker.
And that can lead to other problems.
Sadly, yes. In some cases, it leads to desperate coping mechanisms like addiction. Alcohol or substance abuse can take hold, which only deepens the financial and personal crisis. It's another vicious cycle.
It's just layer upon layer of difficulty. Okay, so given this complex web, let's shift to the response. What is being done and is it working?
Well, the main direct response after a suicide is the government aid we mentioned, Rs 1 lakh per family. In today's terms, 2025, that's roughly $1,200 USD.
$1,200, that feels inadequate, given the scale of debt farmers often face.
Many argue it is inadequate. And as we saw, accessing even that amount is fraught with challenges. The eligibility criteria, the paperwork.
Yeah.
It's tough for families already devastated.
Right. The 376 eligible out of 767. What about preventative measure? Support before things get to that point.
There are other schemes. The PM Kisan Samman Nidhi provides some direct income support. It's Rs 12,000 annually now, with contributions from both central and state governments.
About $150 a year.
Roughly, yes. There's also compensation for crop damage from natural disasters, though again, accessing it can be slow and bureaucratic, and there are efforts toward psychological counseling, which is definitely needed.
But how effective are these, really? You mentioned loan waivers earlier.
Yes. Loan waivers have been tried, like the big one in 2019. But they often run into huge problems. Logistical nightmares, technical glitches meaning eligible farmers get left out, confusion over which types of loans are covered. It often ends up helping some, but leaving many others frustrated and still in debt.
So a patchwork of efforts, but maybe not hitting the root causes effectively.
That seems to be the consensus among many observers and farmers themselves.
Which brings us to solutions. If the current approach isn't enough, what could work? It sounds like it needs a multi-pronged attack, no single magic bullet.
Exactly right. There's no one fix. It needs a combination of immediate relief and deep, long-term changes. First, debt relief has to be tackled head-on. That means more than just waivers. It means properly restructuring loans, providing access to low-interest credit through banks and cooperatives.
And dealing with those private money lenders.
Absolutely crucial. A serious crackdown on predatory lending practices is needed to break that cycle of crippling interest rates.
Okay, so tackle the debt. What about the environmental risks?
Strategic investment in irrigation. This is fundamental. Building canals, check dams, promoting rainwater harvesting, anything to reduce that complete dependence on the monsoon. It provides stability.
Makes sense. Water security is key, then the market prices.
We need ways to ensure fair prices. Strengthening the minimum support price, MSP system, is vital, making sure that safety net is effective and covers realistic costs. And improving market linkages, maybe through farmer-producer organizations so they have more bargaining power and aren't just at the mercy of intermediaries.
What about reducing risk on the farm itself?
Crop diversification is a big one. Encouraging farmers to grow multiple crops instead of just relying on one, like cotton, spreads the risk. If one crop fails or prices drop, they have others to fall back on.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Precisely. And we talked about mental health. Holistic psychological support is important, but it needs to be accessible and culturally sensitive. Critically, though, it must be paired with tangible financial aid. Counseling alone doesn't solve crushing debt. You need both.
Address the immediate stress and the underlying cause.
Exactly. And finally, all this needs to be underpinned by comprehensive policy reforms. Long-term changes to make farming truly sustainable, reducing input costs, improving agricultural extension services so farmers get good advice, and making absolutely sure government schemes actually reach the intended beneficiaries efficiently. No more getting lost in red tape.
It's a huge undertaking. Let's bring this back to the human level again. We've talked statistics, policies, but these are people. Let's think about Raju from Yavatmal. Not a real person, but a composite representing so many. He takes a loan, full of hope for his cotton crop. The monsoon fails, crop wiped out, no income. The moneylender's pressure becomes unbearable. He sees no way forward for himself or his family. He feels trapped. And then he makes that tragic final decision, leaving his family with grief and often the very debt that crushed him. That story, or versions of it, is playing out far too often. These aren't just numbers. They are individuals, families, communities being broken.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember this isn't just their crisis happening somewhere else. It impacts all of us. Our food security, the rural economy, the moral fabric of our society. Every suicide sends ripples outwards. So the question becomes, what can people listening actually do? It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, what can realistically be done by someone who cares but isn't on the ground?
Well, there are concrete things. You can consciously choose to support local farmers, buy directly if possible, support farmers markets or cooperatives, know where your food comes from. You can also advocate for better policies, talk to representatives, support organizations pushing for reform, demand accountability in how schemes are implemented.
Making sure the help actually helps.
Exactly, and simply raising awareness, sharing what you've learned, talking about it, keeping the issue visible. Don't let it just be a news headline that fades. There are many NGOs and civil society groups doing vital work. Supporting them is another way. But it starts with acknowledging the problem and deciding to be part of the solution, however small the step.
It's a powerful reminder that we are connected to this. So, wrapping up this crisis, highlighted by those 767 suicides in Maharashtra early this year, it's a stark, urgent wake-up call. It's deeply rooted in debt, in climate vulnerability, in systemic issues that just haven't been fixed effectively over decades.
The numbers are grim, but they demand action, not despair.
And that action needs to be sustained and comprehensive. We're talking real debt relief, serious investment in irrigation, fair prices, and policies that genuinely support farmers on the ground.
Making farming viable again.
Exactly. Making it a dignified, sustainable way of life, not a life or death gamble. So maybe the final thought for you listening right now is this. How can we collectively build that future? A future where farming is respected, supported, and sustainable. What steps, big or small, will you consider taking to ensure these stories, these lives lost, actually lead to lasting change? Something to really think about.